Hello everyone, and welcome to this Oxcam Pathfinder project webinar. I'm Brian Stewart and I chair the Oxcam Pathfinder project steering group. Today we're here to launch our Floodmobile, and it's great to have so many people attending this virtual event. Before I introduce our keynote speaker, Rebecca Powell MP, the Floods Minister, can I just remind you that there will be a question and answer session at the end of the presentations. And if you wish to submit a question, please use the Q&A function in your screens as we go along. So let's get started. Minister, over to you.
Hello everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me to the launch of the Floodmobile. Obviously it's a great pity we can't be together in person, but everyone understands the reasons why. And it's been great to see that the work on the Pathfinder has continued despite all the challenges that have faced everyone over this rather unusual year. And I did want to commend everyone who's been involved in the project for their dedication and the innovation that they've shown. And I understand that the thinking driving this project was to create a highly visual concept, and a flood house on wheels is what you've come up with, which demonstrates in one place over 50 actions that people could take to help reduce flood damage. It seems like an ingenious idea. I've seen some pictures of it and it's very impressive. I note also the idea of dividing the products into bronze, silver and gold, a banding system with cost indicators, but we obviously do still need to be sure that people choose the approaches that are most appropriate to their needs and not simply on cost grounds. Flooding causes damage to businesses and households with an average of £1.3 billion each year, and DEFRA is investing a record £5.2 billion investment to build 2,000 new flood defences over the next 6 years to better protect 336,000 properties from flooding and coastal erosion. This is double the amount that we invested between 2015 and 2021. We also launched a £200 million community resilience fund to create 25 resilient places across England, and this has just closed for its expressions of interest. Not all homes can be protected through community level flood defences, and there may be a residual risk of overtopping in places where there are defences. Property flood resilience gives homes and businesses in these places the tools to manage the impact that flooding has on their property and their lives. The use of the right combination of materials and design principles in building could mean that they can quickly be brought back into use after flooding and reduce the stress and the disruption that has been caused. And in 2019, our long-term investment strategy showed that overall damages could be reduced by up to a quarter if all residential properties at flood risk were flood resilient. So it's clearly a really important area to focus on. There have been at least 23,000 publicly funded installations of property flood resilience measures since 2009, although, and that's been through grant in aid and recovery funding. But we want to see increased uptake, and we want to see everyone playing their part. We commissioned the Oxford-Cambridge Resilience Pathfinder as one of 3 regional projects in 2018 with the aim of finding new ways of helping people make their homes flood resilient. We will build on the learning from these projects to boost uptake of property flood resilience in homes and businesses across the country. In July 2020, we launched a policy statement setting out our commitments in this area, in addition to learning from these pathfinders. And these include exploring ways to provide greater clarity about the use and effectiveness of property flood resilience measures and how the benefits can be recorded. Reviewing the current approach to flood resilient design is also important. We cannot achieve these goals ourselves. To further increase uptake of property flood resilience in February 2021, we launched a call for evidence on local factors in managing flood and coastal erosion risk and property flood resilience, which closes on the 29th of March. This is seeking evidence about key enablers to ensure the foundations are in place and working effectively to support a thriving property flood resilience sector. We also published a consultation on amendments to the Flood Re scheme, which closes on the 26th of April. This aims to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the scheme and covers proposals to increase uptake of property flood resilience by allowing Build Back Better and reduce premiums for UK households with resilience measures fitted. Please, can I invite you to share your experiences and insights with us to help us ensure that the policy and delivery framework that we put in place provides the right kind of support for your work.
I'd just like to start by saying a huge thanks to Minister Powell for joining us today and supporting the project and launching our Floodmobile. My name's Phil Jones, I'm the Flood and Water Manager at Northamptonshire County Council, and I'm also really proud and pleased to be the Project Exec of the Oxcam Property Flood Resilience Pathfinder project. Quite a mouthful there, but as the title suggests, we are working across the Oxcam region with a huge number of partners, including lead local flood authorities, the Environment Agency, wards companies, and private businesses and consultants as well. And the whole aim of the project is to look to increase the uptake of property flood resilience measures. Now, ourselves, similar to other risk management authorities, we find a real challenge where we've had, maybe a few properties that have flooded in small communities, and it simply isn't viable to do a hard engineered scheme, and natural flood management measures may not be appropriate. So really that's where property flood resilience comes into its own. And furthermore to that, it's really looking at trying to mainstream that as well. So it's not always seen as a fallback option, but stands on its own 2 feet as a viable option. Now, how we've gone about implementing this is through a series of different work packages. The first of these is all looking at kind of inspiring behaviour change and focused around engagement efforts. Obviously with COVID, we've had to move things more virtually, but we're still hoping to go out in the summer and take this Floodmobile out. We've identified 10 communities across the Oxcam region we're looking to work with, and also 3 high street locations. We've also been fortunate in securing working with a large national DIY store, so we can go out there and really showcase what options there may be in store around property flood resilience. Next, we've got 2 really exciting parts as well in work package 2 and 3, which is focused on creation of a demonstration property and a professional services hub. We're working closely with HR Wallingford at their site in Oxfordshire and the National Flood School to create a brand new centre which will have a room that can be flooded, and we'll also have a training facility where we can train a variety of audiences on the code of practice. Finally as well, we've got our PFR database that we're looking at pulling together. The aim of that is that we can identify properties and businesses throughout the Oxcam region which have installed property flood resilience measures, and those where it might be viable as well, and really crucially understand how can we work more closely with the insurance industry to share some of this information through GDPR and look about bringing about a change of how properties can look at reduced insurance premiums or reduce costs when they do flood. And finally, bringing all of this together is our project level evaluation, which is our final work package. And that's looking at sharing all that brilliant information that we are currently doing and how we continue that legacy beyond the project itself. Now I'd like to hand over to Mary, who's going to talk about how and why we decided to use the Floodmobile for community and business engagement.
Thank you, Phil. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Mary Dono and I've been flooded on many occasions. And I know from first-hand experience and from talking to many people across the country in recent years that the worst part of being flooded is the recovery afterwards, the length of time that it takes to build your property back to normal after a flood. So when I was flooded in the year 2000, I adapted my home so if I flooded again, I could recover more quickly, which I did in 2007. So when the floodwater did get in, and it wasn't nearly as much, I was able to mop it out and sanitise it and move downstairs very quickly. And since then, I've been passionate about finding out what we can do at a property level to reduce the impact by trying to keep the water out or make adaptations to enable us to recover more quickly. Over the recent years, I've been talking to people who have taken such moves to reduce the impact. And their stories are truly inspirational of either not being flooded at all or only having to use a mop bucket to mop up the small amount of water that did get in, or being able to mop out and sanitise and move back very quickly. Now, the average person is out of their home for 9 months, and during that time it's a hugely emotional strain on the whole family. And anything we can do to reduce that impact, to reduce the recovery time, is such a positive move to take. So I was delighted when Phil Jones invited me to take part in this new Pathfinder project. I'd worked with Northamptonshire County Council in the past, and we had gone into communities, into the heart of communities, to raise awareness of flood risks and what they could do to help manage risk at a community level. And I was really keen to build on that. And I suggested the Floodmobile to Phil, where we'd take effectively a house on wheels that we had adapted to show all the products that are available to try and keep the water out, but also show flood resilient kitchens and waterproof plaster and all the things that can be done to reduce the impact. Now, I was really glad when Phil really ran with this, and we spent the next couple of hours planning the concept of the Floodmobile, what it should look like. And I'm delighted that later in this webinar, you'll be able to see the finished effect, and to one that I'm so pleased with. But prior to that, I'd like to play you a filmed interview that I did before COVID lockdown with Martin, a homeowner in Leeds, who was on flood warning for 3 constant weeks in 2020. And because of the moves he had taken, he didn't flood at all. It's a powerful film, and I hope you enjoy it. My name's Mary Dono, and I've been flooded on many occasions. Being flooded is an appalling experience, and people are often forced out of their home for about 9 months. So I'm travelling around the country to find out what homes and businesses have done to reduce the impact a flood can have at their home and business level. Today I'm visiting Martin, who lives on the banks of the River Aire in Leeds, to find out what he did after he was flooded in 2015. Martin, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me today. Before we look round your house and see what you've done to reduce the impact a flood can have, could you tell me a bit about the flood you experienced on Boxing Day 2015?
Yes, we were flooded on Boxing Day 2015, and the water level finally came to about 730 millimetres above this flagstone here. Absolutely devastating, because the house completely flooded on all levels, and brought in that terrible silt that comes in and creates so much mess and damage. We knew it was coming because we're members of the flood alert scheme, but there's nothing you can do about it. It's inevitable. And although we had flood panels, the whole house filled with water, and sadly that's what we had to deal with. Devastating. We had to move out, switch off the electricity, and go and stay with friends. We couldn't stay.
You told me that straight after the flood your wife fell over in all the silt on the floor, and that you got an amazing amount of community help.
The clear up is such an effort for everybody. It's, you know, you need as much help as you can get. We were very fortunate to have about 20 members of the community who came down to help us strip out almost immediately. But unfortunately, Fiona slipped on a floor covered in silt and broke her arm. So one of the first things I had to do was to take her down to A&E, and she came back with her arm in a plaster. So that put her out of action.
So it never rains, but it pours.
It never rains, but it pours, yes.
One of the things you told me that I've always remembered is that you stripped out your home really quickly,
Yes.
and you believe that that enabled the home to dry really quickly.
Yeah,
Can you tell me a bit more about that?
I actually am a immense believer of that. We were flooded, I think, on a Sunday. On the Monday, we'd seen the lost adjuster. And on the Monday evening, we had 20 people here pulling out the contents of the house and salvaging what we could. And that has been very important because it enabled us to start the drying out very quickly, but also enabled us to recover an enormous amount of stuff that we would have otherwise thrown away, thus reducing our insurance claim. An example of that is all the electrical boxes. There are 22 electrical boxes in the house. Every single one of them was cleaned up and is now back in the house again. It's those sort of things which make a difference and which the insurers like.
So Martin, would you now show me around your house, and first of all show me what you've done to try and keep the water out, but most importantly in my book, what you've done to enable your home to recover more quickly should you flood again. So Martin, you've taken this cover off especially for me, and I'm fascinated to know just what's going on in there. Can you tell me a bit about it?
Yeah, there are 2 pumps in this room, both linked to channels underneath the floor, and some plastic membranes, so that if any water enters the house, the plastic membranes directed to the channel, and the channel is directed to a small sump, and the pumps can pump the water back outside again. Each of the sumps has a battery backup, so that should the electricity fail, then the pumps will run automatically. You don't have to do anything with them, they just work automatically. It's a system that's used widely in basements.
So you thought outside the box really, you thought that works in basements, let's try it in my home.
Well, it's exactly the same principle. Water comes through the wall, you need to collect it, direct it to somewhere and pump it back outside again. And this system relies on that.
And you can tell me something very positive, that your home was compromised really. It was challenged in February of this year, 2020, and it worked well. You didn't get any flood water in the house at all, did you?
Yeah, in fact, twice. One, because we had a burst pipe in here and water flowed across the floor. And I found this at about 11 o'clock in the morning. And by 3 o'clock, we dried out this floor and everything was back to normal. Simply because this is a plastic floor and plastic skirtings, and they cannot get wet, and they're very easy to clean up using a water vacuum cleaner, which I would recommend all people to have at least one of.
So this is a very attractive plastic looking floor, but flood resilient flooring, and you just literally swept the water when you had your burst pipe into the sump pump.
Yep.
And dry very quickly.
Yes.
And it didn't actually get on top of the floor in this year, did it?
No, underneath the floor we've got other pumps as well, and they managed very easily to keep up with the load. In 2019, we had 19 hours of water standing. So these pumps have got to be very resilient and be able to run for quite some time at very high capacity.
So one important hint that we're going to give people is to have the pumps regularly maintained annually?
Absolutely, yes. Once every year they should be run. The system, like our basement system, needs to be tested every so often and cleaned and serviced to make sure it's all working. It's the same with your flood barriers as well, and flood air bricks. They should all be cleaned and looked at least once a year. It's like a car. You cannot expect it to run without a little bit of attention.
So Martin, you've got 4 doors, how do you stop the floodwater from getting in through your doors?
Well, we've got 4 flood barriers which we put on when we get our Environment Agency warning by telephone, and those also work in harmony with the repointing that we've had done to the lower levels of the wall. And we also have a series of air bricks which are automatic and close when flood water meets them to stop the water getting under the floors.
Because flood warnings have their wicked way of coming about 3:30 in the morning, and actually having self-closing air bricks is one less thing for you to do, isn't it?
Yes, the other important thing though is that if it is at 3 o'clock in the morning, is to make sure that you have everything in the right place, everything ready, sets of tools, sets of bolts, sets of equipment to be able to put it on, that is all serviced and very easily done, particularly if you're not here, for perhaps a neighbour to be able to do it using the instructions that you've left. We have laminated our instructions and leave them with the flood equipment.
So basically you've got your neighbours lined up to fit your flood barriers for you if you're not here, and it's all clearly labelled and they know where to find things and they can easily put them up in your absence.
Yeah, hopefully, Mary, it's all meant to be nice and simple.
Thank you, Mary. Hello everyone, my name is Tandy, and I was thrilled when I was asked to support this fantastic project. Making a real impact to lives and livelihood is something that's really important to me, and having experienced firsthand how property flood resilience can alter the lives of those who have homes and businesses at risk of flooding. For the Oxcam Project Flood Resilience Project, I'll be focusing my efforts on increasing awareness and uptake with business owners. I'll bring my experience of actually delivering these schemes on the ground to help influence and to raise awareness. I have worked with many at-risk communities across the Arc region and therefore understand the flood risk which they face. Having local knowledge is often vitally important if communities are really going to understand what organisations and individuals are saying to them. This is an angle we've looked at as part of the engagement with businesses as part of this project. Firstly, raising awareness of the specific local risks to their business. This makes it real for the owners and something which they feel they should act upon. Referring to local recorded flood events, again just reaffirming those risks, giving it that local feel. For those which haven't flooded before, but identified at risk, raising awareness is always the starting point. Here, visual information is a fantastic help. Using flood risk mapping centred on an area of interest, or perhaps some photos of local flooding, these can be really helpful, but should always be with a friendly smile. Communities need to feel they can relate to flooding, and that the people engaging with them are approachable. Another route we have looked at as part of this project is to engage with local business groups and hubs where networks already exist and they provide a platform to share information. Adapting to social restrictions hasn't been easy, but a good example are the business meetings we've been attending over breakfast, which are now virtual. We've been able to attend these and engage with over 30 or more business owners at once, which has been a fantastic way to engage. As we continue to support our objective, a handbook for businesses is also being developed to provide lots of useful information and an emergency flood plan. Whilst information already exists within the industry, the handbook looks to take the very best bits of this, update some where necessary, but most importantly, provide that local feel. We're looking to include local flood mapping of relevant sources, and also some photos of high street locations of flooding across the Arc region. To ensure the handbook can be reused to engage with other communities and ensure there is a legacy from the project, it is being designed so the local sections can be easily updated. This Oxcam Property Flood Resilience Project provides an excellent opportunity to improve the lives and livelihoods of all those within the Arc region. I hope you found that useful and I look forward to speaking to you a little bit later.
I'm in the very beautiful Element Jewellery shop in Hebden Bridge, talking to Eileen, who is the manager here. Now, Eileen, you have been flooded here on many occasions, so talk to me about your worst flood.
The worst flood by far was December 2015, when it was the worst flood in living memory. So the water reached a height of 8 feet in parts of Hebden Bridge, and here in Element it got to around 6 feet. So it was quite horrific and absolutely devastated the businesses.
So how long were you shut for? And if you could tell us a bit about what the inside of a shop looks like when it's been flooded, because I don't think people know just how bad it is.
No, I think people can't possibly imagine how bad it is. We were closed for 111 days, so just over 3 months that time, which wasn't bad really. Some of the businesses were closed for longer than that. Inside the shop, it is just complete smelly sludge. It's absolutely horrible. You know, can you imagine a beautiful place like this? And it's just like thick mud. It really is. It is disgusting. And then things are thrown all over. So you'll have desks tipped on the side, cabinets, you know, fridges. It's the impacts and the power of water is quite amazing, and you really have to see it to believe it.
So after that, you thought, because you've been flooded so often, enough's enough. We're going to make it flood resilient. So if we do flood again, we can open again quickly.
Absolutely.
So could you tell me what you did?
Yeah, certainly. Obviously, in Hebden Bridge, we know that we will be flooded again, and we know today that it will happen again. So it's a sensible business decision to put the right flood resilience works in place. So we have a lovely polished concrete floor. We have floodgates. We have no post box, so that when the flood water rises over post box level, you can see it in other businesses. It's going straight through. So we took on board those kind of things. We have a mezzanine floor in the office at the back, and that means that we can move things up there. When we're aware that a flood may well happen, we can immediately move things. We have some beautiful sofas in the shop where it's a private consultation area, and we can unzip them, move them into the higher area, and we have power sockets which are about 8 feet high. We have desks that you literally move a handle and they move higher up and down. We keep computers off the floor, anything like that. And we store a lot of things in the mezzanine, all our expensive packaging, that type of thing.
How about the display units?
The display units, again, apart from this one, are quite high, but they're all easily movable. But many of them now are a decent height.
And they're sort of, from what I understand from coming here before, they're powder coated acrylic steel.
Yes.
So you can just literally wash them down.
Yes, that's quite right,
Yes.
Mary. Yes. So everything is in place now, and it just means that we can reopen very quickly when we are flooded.
And also, because I know this shop so well, I keep coming and talking to you, you've forgotten to mention the sump pump, which is incredibly important, isn't it?
We have a sump pump, so the minute that water starts coming through the door, we can start pumping it out. They're very effective. It's excellent, yeah.
So you were flooded again in February, sadly, weren't you?
We were, yes. Nowhere near the same kind of level. It was probably about 18 inches high. It's still a lot of water. But again, we were closed. It happened on the 9th of February and we reopened on the 12th. And we just lost 2 business days because one of those days we wouldn't have been open anyway. And you just spring into action. So the staff know what they're doing. We all come in, the sludge is there, we start sweeping it out and power washing and that kind of thing. And it was amazing to see how quickly we did reopen.
That's just so positive. So to recap, really, you've made the shop flood resilient. You've got emergency plans that you all signed up to, so you know where to move things and what to do and how to activate everything. And then when you've been flooded, bless you, all come in and you wash it down and clean it out. And within 3 days you were open again.
Yeah.
So compared to the 101 days that you were shut before, this is such a positive story to tell, isn't it?
It is positive, and particularly on Market Street, this is a very large shop. It's the size of 3 shops. If this is closed for any period of time with other shops, the whole of Market Street is devastated. the town is devastated and there's nothing for people to look at. So to get these bigger shops back open quickly is quite an achievement.
And I just think it's such an amazingly powerful story to tell. And I'm sure you will join me in encouraging any other shop like yours that's at risk of flooding to think about doing the same.
It's so important. They really must look at it and put the measures in place. It's well worth the time and effort and the money.
Thank you so much for that, and I hope your experience will infuse others.
Oh, thanks, Mary.
Hi everyone, and it's back to me to do a brief introduction to the Floodmobile ahead of the virtual tour, which we'll be seeing in a few minutes' time. So when designing the Floodmobile demonstration vehicle, our aim was to create somewhere that could travel to the heart of communities at risk of flooding and really bring property flood resilience to life. It's a fantastic way of showcasing as many different interventions that can be used at a property level to reduce the impact a flood can have. In fact, it's packed with over 50 different measures. These include those that not only try to keep water out, but very importantly help a property recover as quickly as possible after a flood should water get in. Now, those that visit our demonstration vehicle will see a variety of measures up close and can speak to our PFR experts to understand more about how they work. So, from air bricks that are self-closing, periscope covers to those suitable for listed buildings, they are all on display. Likewise, it shows the many different types of non-return valves, door barriers, flooring, wall coverings, insulation, recoverable kitchens and flood doors, all of which are available to both homeowners and businesses. To make it easy for visitors, you'll see we've divided the products into a bronze, silver and gold banding, which offer a cost indicator but don't necessarily reflect the level of protection provided. Whilst on board the Floodmobile, visitors will be able to watch the inspirational filmed interviews with homeowners and businesses that have been made especially for the Oxcam PFR project by Mary. These are real examples of how people have recovered quickly from being flooded or didn't flood at all because of the moves they've taken, and the results are truly inspiring. Visitors will also be able to access the latest edition of the Homeowner's Guide to Property Flood Resilience, which has been updated with kind sponsorship from Flood Re and Landmark Information Group. Now, without further ado, I'd like to officially unveil the Floodmobile and invite you all to enjoy a brief virtual tour.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed seeing the presentations and seeing those stories. Some really good and inspiring stories there. And the Floodmobile has now been officially launched. We've put together a great expert panel to try and answer your questions. Thanks for those that have been submitted, and we've still got room, I think, for a few more. So please do keep them coming. We'll try and get through as many as we can. Let me start off. This is one for Alistair Mosley. Alistair, can you tell us briefly about the new industry code of practice and how this will be of benefit to homeowners, please?
Yes, thank you, Brian. Thanks, by the way, for all those presentations before, and it was excellent. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, the Code of Practice has been in the making for several years now. It came through an idea of back in 2017 from the Property Flood Resilience Action Plan, which was overseen by DEFRA, and then the key institutions, Institute of Civil Engineers, Institute of Chartered Water and Environmental Management, and the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. And together, those organisations have worked very hard to get the funding together to bring in the expertise, steering groups, and then to develop a code of practice. That was overseen by David Barnforth, who's ex-president of ICE, and written or authored by Syria, one of the construction industry's leading companies for producing documentation for the construction industry, and contributed to by BRE, Building Research Establishment, and some key organisations alongside those. And we now have a code of practice that embraces the whole process, from assessing a property to its vulnerability to flooding, through its own fabric, to the measures that you can put in place to make it flood resilient and flood resistant, right through to certification, handover, and also making it much more insurable at the end of it. But that was the key objective of this code of practice, was to help homeowners gain proper insurance in the future that was affordable, and also for peace of mind. And I think we really have achieved that. And we're really excited that that this is now launched. It was formally launched as a standard in January 2020, and all of the guidelines were launched in 2021. So the whole thing is available on the Syria website, and I'm sure we can provide those links for those. It's free to download. There will be some hard copies that you'll be able to purchase later in the year, but it's there now to be used. It's a complete guide and should transform the way that property flood resilience measures are installed in properties going forward, both for private and commercial applications.
I think you're muted, Brian.
I think I've stunned him into silence. Sorry.
You're still on mute, Brian.
Brian, you're on mute.
Sorry, that's fine. Thank you. We'll make sure that we publish the links to that as part of our sort of debrief to all participants today. So we'll make sure that there's some signposting to that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian.
Let's move on then. Another question, this time I think for Dermot. Could you tell us a bit about Flood Re's plans to reward people who take moves to protect their homes, and your ideas to support newly flooded homes to build back better, something we hear a lot about from DEFRA and the Environment Agency?
Oh, thank you, Brian, for the question, and thank you for the invite and the fantastic presentation, and thank you for allowing us to be involved in this project. I have to say, seeing Mary's videos are always a real shot in the arm these days. Ever wonder about what we're doing at Flood Re and why we're doing it? It's always kind of very inspirational. Which leads us on to the Build Back Better, which the Minister mentioned at the top of your presentations. This is an idea that Flood Re has been talking about for some time. It's something now that DEFRA is currently consulting on. Under the current rules for the Flood Re scheme, we are only able to reimburse insurers for restoring homes to how they were before they're flooded. What we'd like to be able to do is, after someone has been flooded, is be able to pay some extra in order to make that home better insofar as it's resilient and resistant to future flooding. We'd like to pay up to sort of £10,000. And we've called that Build Back Better. And at the moment, if you want to, again, if you're going to circulate some links, there's a DEFRA consultation going on about changes to the Flood Re scheme. And if you follow that link and participate in that consultation, and if you agree, if you can respond to say that you'd like Flood Re to be able to do that, it would be very welcome indeed. So as you know, Brian, the Flood Re scheme exists to make flood insurance both affordable and available today for people, but it only exists for the next 25, well, actually the next 18 years from now. So 25 years in total. And this is part of the things we want to see done so that when Flood Re is no longer around, people's homes, as Alistair just alluded to, can still be insurable.
That's fine, thank you. And then moving on to that, maybe for Ian to comment, many small businesses struggle to obtain flood insurance. If they take moves to reduce the impact of a flood, will it help them to find cover? Ian?
Hi everyone, again, I know everyone's saying it, but it's such a great bit of work everyone's done that we want to make sure people understand what's possible. And that question about knowledge and awareness applies to insurers as much as it does to anybody else. So if a business SME is going to make themselves more resilient, then they need to be able to talk via their broker, I would suggest, to insurers that have an understanding of the benefits and value of flood resilience. So what we're finding in this research we've been doing recently with Leeds University is how we try and understand the format and information that brokers and insurers will need in order to have that really useful conversation. So if you can capture the information about how your business is better protected, either in physical measures or in the way that you organise your business, as Mary was describing with in her interview with the cabinets that were less affected, all this will cost money in a claim. So you have to build the case of what you've done in your business to protect against flooding, speak with your broker, who will help talk to insurers who understand that can be, as Mary has demonstrated, incredibly effective. So it is acknowledged by insurers, but you have to have the conversation with the right people to get the real value from what you've done.
Okay, thank you, Ian, for that. Moving on now, a couple of questions for Dan Bond from the Environment Agency. Firstly, does the new Environment Agency strategy give appropriate weight and focus on PLR measures? And what can the Environment Agency do, given that the Oxcam area is facing such massive potential future housing growth? What can the agency do to ensure that we're not adding to the problem elsewhere through planning decisions?
Yeah, thanks, Brian, and thanks for inviting me today. Some good questions. I think on the planning question is a really good one, and I'll come on to that one. I think firstly on the strategy and property for resilience, the strategy simply, and if you really want to take a high view of this, the strategy is reducing and suggesting we need to think about a wider tool of resilience measures. Traditionally, we thought about more traditional defences, so building traditional flood defences. The strategy recognises they still definitely have a place, so we need to continue protecting homes using traditional measures, but we also need to introduce a wider set of measures, and property flood resilience being one of the key ones. So absolutely, the strategy recognises the need to do that, and also recognises that we do need to use a suite of tools and a suite of measures. So definitely, I think on the planning perspective, I could talk a long time about planning. I'm sure lots of people who are joining today's call have got lots of strong views. I've spotted a couple of other questions around the planning. A couple of things I think to say is, firstly, on most cases, planning authorities do adhere to the Environment Agency advice on planning applications. There still are times when that's not the case. So we do know every year there are sometimes decisions which are made against our advice. So clearly one of the key things we're looking to do is drive that down to zero, really. So when we're providing advice around development in the floodplain, our ambition is to get that number down to zero, which I'm sure everyone would agree is the right thing to do. I think on top of that, I think the close partnership we need to have with local planning authorities and with developers, and also to encourage the use of more sustainable solutions. So again, this is where this new strategy comes in, is it is pushing for more sustainable solutions. So things like nature-based solutions, better use of suds, etc. So I think this is one where we collectively need to work together. We need to drive that number down to zero, really, because we do see the impact. We see the impact of development. At the same time, we do recognise the housing pressure across the country. And unfortunately, many of our towns and cities run along the rivers of the UK. So we know we have an issue. What we can do is make sure we're providing the right advice, and planning authorities listen to our advice.
Okay, thank you for that, Dan. Moving on now, maybe one for Matt in view of his experience. Quite a lot of interest from people on the call around, how do you convince conservation officers, perhaps from local authority, district councils, about the appropriateness of PLR, and how can you make it fit in with the historic fabric of a building, a listed building, or a building in a conservation area?
Yeah, that is particularly interesting actually, and something which we do have to work with more often than not. Now, all buildings should be able to be protected, and it's about making sure that we do find the balance between one, yes, we need to protect it from the floodwater, but also we need to conserve it in terms of its historical value. And this is the importance of finding the right people, the experts, looking at the surveyors to find those right measures which are able to balance all of that. And the projects need to be certified. You know, we need to make sure that what we are recommending is fit for purpose and is able to provide that level of protection. But you quite often will find from speaking to local authority staff in these listed building areas is that they understand that to conserve the building long term, it does need to be protected also from water. So on that basis, it's about having an open and sort of sensible, I think, discussion around those points. But it is certainly doable, and we do have examples of where this has been achieved.
Okay, thank you for that. A lot of people are asking, maybe this is one for Mary or Phil Jones, if he wants to join the call. Lots of people are asking about where they'll be able to see the Floodmobile once restrictions are lifted. A lot of people are saying, yes, you know, it's great to see it on a virtual tour, but they'd like to see it for themselves. They'd maybe like to show their communities, their neighbours. Who can help on that? Maybe Mary first and then Phil.
Well, I think Phil and possibly Alan have both got the finite details, but each of the local authorities that are signed up to work with us as partners have sent in details of communities at high risk that they would like us to work with. For instance, the businesses, we will be going to Dunstable, to Amersham and to, Old Amersham and to Wellingborough. And Wellingborough, of course, has seen some pretty devastating surface water floods not very long ago last year. So it's very pertinent that we should be working with them and communities right across the flood arc. And I'm really looking forward to getting out with them. Perhaps one of the others can give specific details.
Okay, that's good. A lot of questions around, you know, this is all very well, but obviously flooding is a complicated matter. Flooding arises from different sources. Lots of people asking about, you know, it's all very well doing this as an individual householder. What about the farmer and the ditch and risks from fluvial flooding or groundwater flooding? How do we make sure that there is some, you know, really joined up thinking that everybody works to try and reduce flooding and flood risk throughout the Oxcam arc and indeed more broadly? Who wants to have a go at answering that, please?
I think Phil would be best placed to answer that because he's floods and water manager for the area.
Okay, Phil, you have a go. Acting as a good proxy, all your flood colleagues across all the lead local flood authorities in Oxcam.
I'm sorry, I missed the very start of that because I just had my headphones out. But was it around working together? It's
about working together. It's about, you know, this. We've seen some great inspirational stuff today, and you know, individual householders may be very inspired to do something about it. But obviously, as we all know, flood risk comes from many different sources. How do we make sure that, you know, everybody is working together to minimise flood risk, whether that's, you know, from groundwater, from fluvial, from coastal, or indeed from other sources?
And I think that's one of the major challenges, and that's where I think, you know, as homeowners communities, you know, you don't care where it comes from, you just want to make sure that something's being done about it. And I think especially as our role as lead local flood authorities at the county council, you know, it does change, it does tend to differ around the country, but I always see our role as a bit of a coordination role. So when people come to us, we then act as that bridge to say, okay, yeah, we know water companies can help it, you know, help with that aspect. Environment Agency can help with that aspect. And actually it's looking for those schemes that can deliver all of those multi-benefits. And, you know, property flood resilience has that place in terms of, you know, it can help support with fluvial flood risk, it can help support with surface water and other aspects. And I think that's where this comes into its own, where actually we can showcase those measures that do have those benefits for any source of flood risk. And actually we can all collectively along with homeowners and communities, help to install those and fund those as well through, whether it be grant and aid, Build Back Better, or those are the sources that are available to us.
Yeah, that's good. Lots of people asking about funding. Where could we get funding, perhaps, to install some of these measures? And is this something that either the government should consider looking at? And also, in the same vein, about the standards. How can people be really assured that, say, the demonstration products in the Floodmobile will work and will meet, reasonable consumer standards? Who can help with that?
Brian, I don't mind talking a bit about funding, and then I'm sure others can join in, particularly around the standards aspect. So, as many people probably may know on the line, we have sort of funding rules for flood schemes, sort of broader flood schemes. I think what we're looking at in the future, as I mentioned before in the strategy, is having a broader suite of measures, which ultimately leads to potentially a broader suite of funding approaches. There, we have recently made some changes to our what we call the partnership funding calculator, to make some changes there. There's currently some consultation. There is a question on the board as well from Cyril Hogg, and this helps answer your question, Cyril. So there's currently some, there will be, there's a call for evidence at the moment in the future consultation from the government looking at how we can better potentially, or look at how we can better fund some of those either deprived communities, some of those smaller communities who flood frequently. So that is something the government are really keen to explore. And that's been a real challenge. How do we fund? Often developing the funding package for large schemes has been easier compared to some of the smaller locations where things like property flood resilience are really key. And so I think that's coming this year. I think specifically on property flood resilience, we do often incorporate property flood resilience measures as part of large schemes. I think we will see more and more of that. There's also routes through our regional flood and coast committees. So again, working close with local authorities, and others on the call may want to talk a little bit about that. But there are a number of routes for funding. There's also, as many of you who have suffered from flooding in the past will have seen, the recovery grants as well, which are administered by the lead local flood authorities as well. So there are a variety of routes for funding for property flood resilience. I think the simple advice would pick up your phone, touch your local environment agency or your local authority in the first instance.
Okay, and the other aspect of the question about the of equipment, is there kite mark standards for these things? How do we know that these are, genuinely up to the job?
Can I come in there ahead of Mary? Actually, Mary, I don't mind. I'll defer to you.
Alistair, you go.
Well, I'm going to say the same as you anyway. Okay, so we have a code of practice, as you just heard, which is like the umbrella. Beneath that, we then have many standards, and the most prominent one is BS 85. What's the number again, Mary?
I'm glad you've picked it up because I've forgotten. But we have actually now got a full kite mark for products. I'm hopeless on numbers.
Yeah, those double A's. I can't remember. Somebody will pitch that in. But anyway, this is a kite mark for all products and their applications onto buildings. It's really important that if you are buying property flood resilience equipment, that it is properly kite marked. The majority of equipment has now been through a standard assessment. There are new products coming in, but they will continue then to be applying for kite mark registration. And we're also now looking at new standards for the actual installation process. So that's and particularly training and making sure that only skilled individuals install these measures and make the properties flood resilient. Really, really important. And the Environment Agency is leading on that, supported by CIWIM actually, which is exciting as well. So we're doing our bit.
If I can just follow on from that, when I was first flooded 20 years ago, I've come on a tremendously long journey, and the standards have improved. The experience for the homeowner will improve, especially with the new code of practice. The Floodmobile is packed full of kite mark products, and all the products that we've got in there we know of a very good standard. The homeowner's guide to flood resilience that can be accessed via knowyourfloodrisk.co.uk has recently been updated, and my academic research has verified and looked into the standards of all the products that are exhibited in there. So I encourage everybody that's at risk of flooding to perhaps visit that guide, because it's literally hot off the press, especially for the Pathfinder.
Can I just
That's
quickly
fine.
come in?
Thank you.
I've just looked it up. It's 85. I've just lost 85118 is the code that you want.
I think it's
851188.
That's right. I was going to say, for the avoidance of any doubt, because it's been chopped and changed, it's BS 851188.
Yeah.
Mary, I was just going to ask you the last question that we've got time for, and that's thinking about your experiences and the first time you were flooded, and thinking about how you would build back. Would the Floodmobile and the kind of products have helped you in all the decisions you took to build back better?
Absolutely. When I was first flooded, and I'm sure many people that are listening to this that have been flooded, there was no support, no advice, nothing available. And had the Floodmobile come to my community, I'd have bitten its hand off, if I'm allowed to bite hands off people.
Okay, that's great. All right, well, thanks very much for your questions. I think we've tried to distill some of the themes, but I know that the administrators on the call will make sure that there are some suitable follow-ups. We're almost at the end of our allotted time. How quickly that hour has gone. So can I close now by thank you all for attending, for your great questions. I hope you found the presentations useful and that we tried to cover the most popular questions as we went along. So can I thank the presenters and also the panel members for their input today. As I think some questions were asking, we will be publishing this webinar on the Flood Toolkit website, and we'll also be publishing some links that we've discussed as we've gone along. So hopefully that will be a useful reminder. So all registered participants will receive that as soon as we can after the meeting. A very interesting topic. Obviously, the project will continue to deliver on some of its other work strands and themes, and no doubt will be some further events that we can publicise about those other strands in due course. So I hope that you will be inspired if you're a householder to invest in PLR. I hope that if you're a community, you will be demanding that the Floodmobile is coming to a community near you as soon as we can. That's the whole purpose of having it. And so when restrictions are lifted, we hope that it will be a very good legacy and a reminder of what can really be done. So can I just then finally close by thanking you all for attending today. Take care, keep safe, goodbye, and thanks for joining us. Thank you.
So.
Bye-bye.